My wife cheated with my friend for a year. My kids abandoned me and chose the affair partner for money. But 8 years later, when my business exploded and I'm successful, they came back begging for $50K. What I did left them speechless. I'm 58 years old. I own a pretty successful sports facility business, and I basically spent the last 8 years completely alone because my kids decided I was the villain of the story when I divorced their mother. The thing is, now they want back in my life, and I don't know. I guess I need to get this whole thing off my chest because the situation got so weird that I don't even understand what to feel about it. Look, I was a high school baseball coach, worked there for like 20 years, and my life was pretty normal. You know, nothing special, but not bad either. I had my marriage with Laura, my two kids, Benjamin and Olivia, a decent house, the typical stuff. Laura and I met in college, got married young, like at 23 or 24. I don't remember exactly, and we spent like 30 years together. 30 years? Can you believe it? And it turns out that during the last of those years, she was sleeping with Vincent, a supposed college friend that I didn't even remember well until everything exploded. I found out 8 years ago in the stupidest way possible. She left her phone on the kitchen table while she showered, and a message came through. I'm not one of those people who checks phones. Seriously, I'd never done it. But the message appeared on the screen and said something like, "Last night was amazing. Can't wait to see you again." And I just stood there with a coffee cup in my hand thinking, what the hell? I opened the phone. He knew her password. It was Olivia's birthday. And there it was, literally everything. A full year's worth of messages. Photos, I'm not going to describe because they make me want to vomit just remembering them. Plans to meet at hotels. The whole complete affair package. I confronted Laura that same night when the kids weren't around. Well, kids, Benjamin was like 26 and Olivia 24, but that's what I call them. She cried, told me she was sorry, that whatever, that it had been a mistake, all the typical litany, I guess everyone who gets caught, cheating says. But the truth is I was already out. Mentally, I mean, like something turned off in me that day and there was no going back. I told her I was going to divorce her, that I wasn't going to tolerate this for one more second, and she went into total panic because she knew I was going to leave her with nothing. I mean, technically we had separate property, but I had paid for the house almost entirely, and she had been working part-time at a boutique that generated almost nothing. I moved to a crappy apartment like 2 weeks later, hired a lawyer who cost me like half my savings but who was good, and started the divorce process. And this is where everything became a real nightmare, because Benjamin and Olivia, my kids who I had raised, taken to their soccer games and piano lessons and all those parent things, basically told me I was being too hard on their mother. Too hard. On someone who had been cheating on me for a full year with a guy who was supposedly our friend. We had this horrible conversation in my new apartment, the three of us sitting on boxes, because I hadn't even finished moving in properly. Benjamin told me, "Dad, I know Mom made a mistake, but can't you be more understanding? She's devastated." And I just stared at him thinking, is he seriously telling me this? I explained, or tried to explain, that their mother had made conscious decisions for a full year, that this wasn't a one-night mistake, that there had been lies upon lies. Olivia started crying and said I was destroying the family, that why couldn't I forgive and move on? I told them I wasn't going to go easy on her in the divorce, that I was going to fight for what was mine, and that she was going to have to face the consequences of her actions. And that's when they basically cut me off. Benjamin said something like, "If you can't support Mom in this difficult time, then I think we need space." And Olivia nodded her head like it was the most reasonable thing in the world. Difficult for her, seriously? I was the one who had been betrayed. I was the one who had discovered his life was a lie, but somehow I was the bad guy for not wanting to give away the house and half my pension to the woman who had cheated on me. The divorce was finalized like 6 months later, and it was brutal. Laura got some money, but not what she wanted, and I kept my full pension and some other things. And then, 2 months after the divorce was final, Laura married Vincent. 2 months. I mean, she didn't even wait a decent amount of time, just bam, here's my new husband, who by the way is the guy I cheated on you with. It was like getting slapped after you'd already been beaten. Benjamin and Olivia went to the wedding. I saw them in photos that people I knew sent me, He didn't ask to see them, but everyone assumed I'd want to know. All happy and smiling like nothing. And I was still the villain of the story somehow. They stopped answering my calls completely, changed their numbers eventually, blocked me on social media, everything. It was like I had died to them. The worst was when Benjamin got married 6 years ago. I found out through my sister, who still talked to Laura occasionally because they had been friends before the whole disaster. I wasn't invited. My own son got married and I wasn't invited. They told me, through my sister because they didn't even have the balls to tell me directly, that it would be awkward having me there with Mom and Vincent. Awkward for whom, I wanted to ask. But I didn't even get the chance. 4 years later, the same thing happened with Olivia. Another wedding I wasn't invited to. Another important occasion where I basically didn't exist for my children. During those 8 years, I worked, hung out with some friends, tried dating a couple times, but it never worked because, honestly, I was too bitter. I spent many nights alone in my apartment thinking about what I had done wrong. If I had been a bad father, if somehow I deserved this, my therapist, because yes, I went to therapy for a while, told me it wasn't my fault, that my kids were adults making adult decisions and that eventually, maybe they would understand. But the years passed and nothing changed. Like 3 years ago, 2 friends of mine and I decided to open a business. One of them had inherited some money and had this idea to create a sports training facility, like a big place with courts, gym, professional trainers, programs for kids and adults, that type of thing. Since I had been a baseball coach my whole life, it made sense for me to join. I invested what I had saved, which wasn't much, but something, and we launched. The first 2 years were tough. I'm not going to lie. There were moments when I thought we were going to go broke, but little by little, the business started to grow. It turned out there was a lot of demand for this type of facility in our area, and since we offered good programs and had decent trainers, people started coming. Last year, the business exploded, in the good sense. Suddenly, we had waiting lists. We had to hire more staff. We were making plans to expand to a second location, and I, who had been living in a 2-bedroom apartment and driving a 2010 Honda Civic, suddenly had real money. I bought a house, nothing extravagant but nice. I bought a new car. I started living a bit better. I wasn't a millionaire or anything, but I was comfortable, more than I had been in years. And then, like at the beginning of this year, I received a message from Benjamin. After 8 years of total silence, a message that said something like, "Hi, Dad. I know it's been a long time, but I'd like us to talk." I stared at the message for like an hour, not knowing what to do. Part of me wanted to respond immediately, like I was desperate to have my kids back in my life. But another part of me, the part that had been hurt and alone for 8 years, was super skeptical. I responded after a few days, something short like, "Sure, we can talk." And then the calls started, first with Benjamin and then with Olivia too. And the thing is, at first it seemed genuine, like they wanted to reconnect. They told me about their lives, about their jobs, both worked at Vincent's furniture company, which already seemed suspicious to me, about their kids that I didn't even know. Benjamin had 2 kids, 5 years old and 1, and Olivia had a 6-month-old baby. I was a grandfather and didn't even really know it. I mean, I knew they existed from things my sister mentioned, but I had never seen them. After like a month of calls, they asked to see me in person. They came to my new house, and I was nervous, like I didn't know what to expect. They arrived with the kids, and seeing my grandchildren for the first time was weird. Like emotional but also strange because they were these little people who shared my blood but who were complete strangers to me. The kids called me Sir at first because they didn't even know who I was. We spent like 2 hours talking about everything and nothing, and then Benjamin dropped what they really wanted. He told me they had been thinking about the lost time, that they regretted how they had handled things, and that they wanted me to be part of their kids' lives. And then, almost like it was casual, he mentioned they needed financial help, that things were difficult, and that if I could lend them some money it would be really helpful. He didn't mention a specific amount, but from how he said it, I knew they weren't talking about a few $1,000s, and that's when it all clicked. 8 years of silence. And suddenly, they wanted to reconnect right when I had a successful business. Not when I was alone in my crappy apartment earning a teacher's salary. Not when I needed them after the divorce. Now, when I had money, I told them I needed to think about it. That it was a lot to process suddenly, and they left. They looked disappointed but tried to hide it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the last 8 years, about all the times I had tried to contact them and they had ignored me, about the weddings I wasn't invited to, about the grandchildren I didn't know, and now they wanted money. I went over it, and the next day I blocked them both. I know it sounds harsh, but I needed space to think without them pressuring me. I called my sister and asked her what she knew about Benjamin and Olivia's situation. And it turns out Vincent, Laura's husband and my kid's boss, was in serious financial trouble. His furniture company was basically going bankrupt. He had lost several important contracts, and he was in the process of selling the business. My kids were going to lose their jobs, and apparently Laura and Vincent were also having problems because all their financial security was disappearing. And then it all made sense. My kids hadn't chosen their mother out of loyalty or love after the divorce. They had chosen Vincent because he had given them jobs, security, money. They had been, and I don't like using this word, but it is what it is, sellouts. They sold their relationship with me for financial stability, and now that that stability was going away, suddenly I was important again. Like 2 weeks after I blocked them, they showed up at my house. They rang the doorbell like crazy, shouting that they needed to talk to me. I was inside and could hear them but didn't open the door. Benjamin was shouting things like, "Dad, I know you're there. Please open the door. We need to talk." And Olivia was crying, saying they were sorry, that please give them a chance. The neighbors probably thought it was some kind of crazy drama, and they were right. Eventually, I opened the door, but didn't let them in. I told them, standing there in the doorway, that I knew exactly why they were there, that I knew about Vincent's company, and that it was pretty obvious they only wanted me back for my money. Benjamin tried to deny it, said they wasn't like that they really wanted to reconnect, but I cut him off. I told them, "You left me alone for 8 years, chose the guy who slept with your mother while we were married, excluded me from your weddings, from your lives, from everything, and now that I have something you need, suddenly I'm important again." Olivia kept crying and saying they had made a mistake, that they were young and confused, and I told her they were 24 and 26 years old when it all happened. They weren't kids. They were adults who made adult decisions, and now they had to live with those consequences. And then I told Benjamin something I had been holding in for years. I told him that he and his sister were sellouts, that they had chosen Vincent for money and security, and that now that that well was drying up, they came running to me. He got so angry that for a moment I thought he was going to hit me, but he just turned around and left, with Olivia following him. I thought that would be it, but like a week later they showed up at my work, at the sports facility. They arrived with all 3 kids, Benjamin's 2 and Olivia's baby, during peak hours when there were tons of people training. They looked for me in my office, and my assistant told them I was in a meeting, which was true. They said they would wait, and sat in the reception area with the kids for like 2 hours. When I came out of my meeting and saw them there, I felt this weird mix of anger and something else I can't describe well. The kids looked tired and bored, the baby was crying, and Benjamin and Olivia looked desperate. I told them to come to my office, but for the kids to stay with my assistant, who would give them something to eat from the cafeteria. Once in my office, with the door closed, Benjamin started with everything. He told me they needed $50,000, that it was to start a new business, that Vincent had left them with nothing, and that I was their only option. I told them no, plain and simple. I explained that I wasn't going to give them money after everything that had happened, that if they wanted to have a relationship with me eventually we could work on that, but that I wasn't going to be their bank. Benjamin completely lost his temper, started yelling at me that I was a horrible father, that Mom was right about me, that I only thought about myself. I told him to calm down or leave, and he chose to leave, again dragging Olivia with him, who at least had the decency to look embarrassed by the whole show. Like 2 months later, I received an email from both of them. It was long, like 3 pages, and it was basically an apology. They admitted they had chosen their mother and Vincent for financial reasons, that Vincent had offered them good jobs with good salaries when they were just starting their careers, and that had weighed heavily in their decision to cut me off. They said they knew they had been wrong, that they had been selfish, and that they didn't expect me to forgive to them, but that they wanted me to know the truth. And they also admitted that the reason they had come back now was because they needed money, that they had thought about creating a business together but didn't have startup capital and had thought I could invest. The honesty was something, I guess. At least they were no longer pretending this was about reconnecting out of pure family love. I left the email there for weeks without responding, just thinking about what I wanted to do. Because part of me, the part that had been alone for 8 years, that had missed the weddings and births and everything, that part wanted to forgive them and have them back no matter the reasons. But another part, the part that was still hurt and angry, didn't want to give them anything. In the end, after like 2 months from that email, I sent them a short message. I told them we could have a dinner, the 4 of us, at my house, but that I wasn't going to give them money for any business. I made it clear that if they wanted to try to rebuild a relationship, it had to be without financial conditions, that I wasn't going to be their economic backup plan. I told them they could accept those terms or not, that it was their decision. They accepted. We had dinner like 3 weeks ago. It was awkward at first, very awkward. Nobody really knew what to say or how to act. But eventually we started talking, really talking, not just superficialities. Benjamin told me about his marriage, about his kids, about how it had been difficult these years even though financially they were okay. Olivia too. She told me about her husband, who I didn't even know, about her daughter, about her fears about the future now that the job was gone. And I told them about me too, about the 8 years of loneliness, about the times I had wanted to call them and had stopped myself because I knew they wouldn't answer, about how I had built this business partly to have something to focus on so I wouldn't think about not having a family. I think that night we all cried at some point, which is weird because none of us are very emotional like that. I told them that if they wanted me to be part of their lives again, it had to be gradual, that we couldn't just pretend the last 8 years hadn't happened. I told them I wanted to get to know my grandchildren, spend time with them, build a real relationship, but that it was going to take time and they had to respect that. And I repeated that I wasn't going to invest in any business or lend them money, that if they needed that, they would have to find another way, but that what I could offer was being present if they really wanted that. Since that dinner, they've come to my house 2 more times, with the kids. The kids call me Grandpa now, which is weird and nice at the same time. Benjamin and Olivia are looking for new jobs. It's costing them, but they're trying. I don't know if Laura and Vincent know we're reconnecting. I haven't asked and they haven't mentioned anything. Honestly, I prefer not to know. Do I trust them completely? No. Do I think if my business went bankrupt tomorrow they'd keep coming? I'm not sure. But I also can't live the rest of my life alone and bitter about things that happened years ago. My partners tell me to be careful, to protect my assets and my business, and I have a lawyer who made sure everything is well structured legally so nobody can come after my things. But I'm also trying to give them a chance to see if we can build something real. Last week, Benjamin's 5-year-old, who's named after me, Thomas, asked me if I could teach him to play baseball. I told him, yes, that we could start this weekend. And when I said it, I saw Benjamin looking at me with this expression I can't describe. Well, like gratitude mixed with shame or something. I don't know what's going to happen with us. If we're really going to be able to rebuild this family or if this is just temporary until they find another source of stability. But for now, I'm trying. And I guess that's all I can do.